Chapter 21. Going Aboard. It was nearly 6 o'clock, but only gray and perfect misty dawn when we drew nigh the wharf. "There are some sailors running ahead there, if I see right," I said to Queequeg. "It can't be Shadow. She's off by sunrise, I guess. Come on." "Avast!" cried a voice whose owner at the same time, coming close behind us, had laid a hand upon both our shoulders, and then, insinuating himself between us, stood stooping forward a little, in a little uncertain twilight, strangely peering from Queequeg to me. It was Elijah. "Going aboard? Hands off, will you?" said I. "Looky here," said Queequeg, shaking himself. "Go way." "Ain't going aboard, then?" "Yes, we are," said I, "but what business of that is yours? Do you know, Mr. Elijah, that I consider you a little impertinent?" No, I wasn't aware of that," said Elijah, slowly and wonderingly, looking from me to Queequeg with the most unaccountable glances. "Elijah," said I, "you will oblige my friend and me by withdrawing. We are going to the Indian and Pacific Oceans, and would prefer not to be detained." Ye be, coming back afore breakfast?" "He's cracked, Queequeg. Come on." "Halloa!" cried the stationary Elijah, hailing us when we removed a few paces. "Never mind him," said I. "Queequeg, come on." But he stole up to us again, and suddenly clapping his hand on my shoulder, said, "Did ye see anything looking like a man going toward the ship a while ago?" Struck by this plain and matter-of-fact question, I answered, saying, "Yes, I thought I did see 4 or 5 men, but it was too dim to be sure." Very dim, said Elijah. "Morning to ye." Once more we quitted him, but once more he came softly after us, touching my shoulder again, saying, "See if you can find him now, will ye?" "Find who?" Morning to ye, he rejoined, again moving off. "Oh, I was going to warn ye against, but never mind, it's all one, all in the family, too. Sharp frost this morning, ain't it? Goodbye to ye, shan't see ye again very soon, unless it's before the grand jury." And with these cracked words he finally departed, leaving me, for the moment, in no small wonderment at his frantic impudence. At last, stepping on board the Pequod, we found everything in profound quiet, not a soul moving. The cabin entrance was locked within, the hatches were all on, and lumbered with coils of rigging. Going forward to the forecastle, we found the slide of the scuttle open. Seeing a light, we went down, and found only a rigger there, wrapped in tattered pea-jacket. He was thrown a whole length upon 2 chests, his face downwards, and enclosed in his folding arms. The profoundest slumber slept upon him. "These sailors we saw, Queequeg, where can they have gone to?" said I, looking dubiously at the sleeper. But it seemed that, when on the wharf, Queequeg had not at all noticed what I now alluded to. Hence I would have thought myself to have been optically deceived in that matter, were it not for Elijah's otherwise inexplicable question. But I beat the thing down, and again marking the sleeper, jocularly hinted to Queequeg that perhaps we'd best sit up with the body, telling him to establish himself accordingly. He put his hand upon the sleeper's rear as though feeling if it was soft enough, and then, without more ado, sat quietly down there. "Gracious, Queequeg, don't sit there," said I. "Oh, pretty good suit," said Queequeg. "My country way. Don't hurt him face." "Face," I said. "Call that his face? Very benevolent countenance, then. But how hard he breathes. He's heaving himself. Get off, Queequeg. You're heavy. It's grinding the face of the poor. Get off, Queequeg. Look, he'll twitch you off soon. I wonder he don't wake." Queequeg removed himself to just beyond the head of the sleeper and lighted his tomahawk pipe. I sat at his feet. We kept the pipe passing over the sleeper from one to the other. Meanwhile, upon questioning him in his broken fashion, Queequeg gave me to understand that in his land, owing to the absence of settees and sofas of all sorts, the king, chiefs, and great people generally were in the custom of fattening some of the lower orders for ottomans, and to furnish a house comfortably in that respect you only had to buy 8 or 10 lazy fellows, and lay them rounded piers and alcoves. Besides, it was very convenient on an excursion, much better than those garden chairs which are convertible into walking sticks. Upon occasion, a chief calling his attendant and desiring him to make a settee of himself under a spreading palm tree, perhaps in some damp, marshy place. While narrating these things, every time Queequeg received the tomahawk from me, he flourished the hatchet side of it over the sleeper's head. "What's that for, Queequeg?" "Perry easy, killy. Oh, perry easy." He was going on with some wild reminiscence about his tomahawk pipe, which it seemed he had 2 uses, both which in its two uses both brained his foes and soothed his soul, when we were directly attracted to the sleeping rigger. The strong vapor now completely filling the contracted hole, it began to tell upon him. He breathed with a sort of muffledness that seemed to trouble in the nose, then revolved over once or twice, then sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Hulloa," he breathed at last. "Who be ye smokers?" "Shipped men," answered I. "When does she sail?" "Aye, aye, you're going to... Are ye... Aye, aye, ye are going in her by ye? She sails today. The captain came aboard last night." "What captain? Ahab? Who but him indeed?" I was going to ask him some further questions concerning Ahab when we heard a noise on the dock. "Holloa, Starbuck's astir," said the rigger. "He's a lively chief mate. That's a good man and a pious, but all alive now I must turn to." And so saying, he went on the deck and we followed. It was now a clear sunrise. Soon the crew came on board in twos and threes. The riggers bestirred themselves. The mates were actively engaged, and several of the shore people were busy bringing in various last things aboard. Meanwhile, Captain Ahab remained invisibly enshrined within his cabin. This is the end of chapter 21. So we have a new character who... We have the unnamed rigger. Rigger is someone who works in the rigging, which is the ropes and such up above the ship. And to rig something is usually to rope it. And so a rigger is someone who rigs. And so the rigger is in charge of setting up ropes and tying things down and, the ropes that hold the mast up. And so we have this unnamed rigger. And then he mentioned Starbuck, and we'll hear more about Starbuck later. Now, Starbuck is the name. There's a chain of coffee shops named Starbucks after this character in Moby Dick. So you have Starbucks Coffee, which is named after Starbuck and Moby Dick. And so here he's just mentioned. As I said, we'll see more about him later. We saw Elijah again. Now, Elijah came up to Ishmael and Queequeg 3 times and touched them and asked them if they were going on board. And so 3 times is usually a hint that something's important. If something happens 3 times, then, it goes back to the rule of 3, that 3 things is funny. And then 3 times is what it takes to establish something as a pattern. 3 points define a plane. I'm sure I've gone into that one before. But, he ran up to them 3 times to ask them if they were going aboard. Then you had the people who Ishmael saw going onto the ship that Elijah might have seen. Queequeg didn't, and they weren't actually on the ship. So were they ghosts? Were they just Ishmael's imagination in the fog? It's hard to say. But, so that's kind of a weird sign there. But, it's kind of a weird sign. But they are on board the ship now and getting ready to sail. Ahab you haven't seen yet. You've just heard him mentioned. Now, I'm sure I've gone into this before. It's one of those things that's kind of important. In horror movies, in good horror movies, you don't see the villain until late. And this is something that people have stumbled onto accidentally, and then they do it intentionally. Jaws is one of the famous examples, where Steven Spielberg had this mechanical shark that was just totally poorly made. It wasn't scary. It was more funny than scary, and it wasn't frightening, and it wasn't anything. He's like, I could not put this on film. But he was making a shark movie, and he couldn't really show the shark. So what he did was he waited until like 2/3 of the way into the movie before you actually see the shark. And then there's very little actual screen time for it, because the shark just barely shows up. But there's a lot of, is it out there? Is it hiding? The jump scares and things like that. But, so, we don't see Ahab. We've heard about him. We've heard about, one leg, really scary, really evil. Hard taskmaster, but a good person. And it's so you get this whole build up where you get bits and pieces about him, but you don't actually see him. So we have a new character introduced who's fairly minor, but gets a lot of name recognition. They named a character in Battlestar Galactica after him, which was like the only character who wasn't yeah, all of the characters in Battlestar Galactica were like named mythologically and named after in various mythologies, except for Starbuck, who was named right out of Moby Dick, and it was like, okay, but great name. Okay, coffee, but great name. And that is chapter 21.